Well, hey, everybody, welcome. It's so good to see you. My name is Jesse Carbo. I'm with the Digital Missions Project, and I'm here with my friend Jeff. Jeff, why don't you take a moment and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do right now?
Yeah, well, first thing I'm going to do is silence my cell phone.
That's a good idea. I should check mine.
Because I just got a text. So I'm Jeff Gauss, and I'm the founder and president of Church Plant Solutions. We do bookkeeping and social media, and also leadership coaching, consulting for churches of all shapes and sizes, not just church plants, but I'm a church planter at heart. Planted 3 churches over the course of 18 years, currently serve as an executive pastor at a church. And so we just love the church and love church plants especially, but we do serve churches of all shapes and sizes, as I like to say.
It's awesome. Yeah, along the way, as we go to different conferences and things, we meet interesting people. We meet people like, man, I want to know that person. I want to get to know them more and about what they're doing. And that's how you and I met, Jeff. We were at a Converge church conference in Orlando, Florida,
Yep.
um, not too long ago, so, just a few months back, and so we met. I saw what you guys were doing, and yeah, so we've spoken a few times, and then decided to jump on video here and record this podcast or vodcast or whatever you call it. But just to share a little bit about our experiences in ministry. You currently as an executive pastor, me as a former executive pastor, but the fact that we also have businesses that serve the local church. And just like you said, you love the church. I also love the church and believe, um, you know, in the importance of supporting the work of the local church. And so, um, tell me how you started Church Plant Solutions. Give me that background story. How did that come about?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a tragedy mixed in there because I started it as the result of burning out in ministry. So
Mm,
about 2 years into my third church plant, we moved our family about an hour away from where we were previously, and didn't think an hour would be that much of a difference. But we had just were pretty new into an adoption where we adopted 3 girls. And so all of our support network was in that town that we left. We didn't have any family around. And so anyway, about 2 years into that new church plant, 2 or 3, I can't remember. It was all blurred now. I just hit a wall, and I just, it was a lot of the family stuff, stress of family, stress of planting, kind of the victim of my own high expectations, I think, where I just felt like, it was never enough, like a lot of, I think maybe church planters feel that way, like, it's not growing fast enough, as fast as you'd hoped and dreamed and all that stuff. And so anyway, I just hit a wall and I knew I needed to make a change. And I mean, I was like clinically diagnosed with burnout. I took 9 weeks off. The doctor said I needed to take a year off from ministry, but being in a young church plant, didn't see how I'd do that without killing the church. And they graciously gave me 9 weeks off. And so I did that, went back into, resumed back after that 9 weeks, but knew that, started kind of formulating an exit strategy. And so I was looking at, all these things. I've been a pastor for 18 years. I'm like, what am I going to do? And I came across this article that about starting your own bookkeeping business. And I thought, hey, prior to going into ministry, I served 4 years as an accountant, corporate accountant at Walgreens corporate headquarters, and then Ameriprise Financial. And I thought, I could do that. And, I got the entrepreneurial from being a church planter. I can start a business. And then as I got into it, it's like, if I do this, though, I really want to do it for churches. And I knew from my own experience and the pastors that I knew, that finances was a big pain point, and bookkeeping was a big pain point for pastors and church plants. And it was always a challenge to find somebody that was reliable and trustworthy and skilled, knew understood the church world. And so I felt like it was a real place where I could still serve the church and love the church, and use my skills and experience as both a pastor as an accountant to serve her well. So Church Plant Solutions was born in June of 2019. So just, well, we're actually, I think 4 years old today, is recording it on June 1st. officially.
That's good. Well, I don't know if we say happy birthday or happy anniversary, but
Yeah,
congrats. That's amazing to start a business that serves the church and for it to be 4 years old. That's great. A lot of entrepreneurs who start businesses, they don't make it past, a year. It's hard. We are actually Digital Missions Project's actually celebrating a year this month. We launched in May
awesome.
of 2022. So
Yeah. Well,
it's pretty exciting.
congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.
They're having a party here today.
That's right. We are having a party. Um, talk, and it's funny because one of the things that attracted me to your booth at the Converge conference was because you do bookkeeping, because I also do a little bit of bookkeeping in my previous roles as an executive pastor. I've had to oversee, budgets and finances. And even though at some of those churches, I wasn't actually doing the bookkeeping, we had a part-time bookkeeper on staff, but I had to learn that stuff. I had to figure out, I started off as a youth pastor and then was a church planner and then, ended up becoming an executive pastor. And nobody taught me QuickBooks Online or, how to do these things. But I learned and I picked this stuff up. And then currently, where my office is at this little church by my house, I do their books. And, and I have some bookkeepers that help me and, and I ask questions and I'm always doing research and trying to learn. But there is a reality, I think, that comes for churches that it does take money to run a church. And
Indeed, it does.
and I feel like, having been in ministry for 27 years and my father was in ministry for, my whole life growing up. I mean, so 40 plus years for him, like, I feel like sometimes money is one of those conversations that's somewhat taboo or people are just uncomfortable to talk about. Or one of the things I hear often is like, church is not a business, but in many ways, church is a business. Like you have to manage a church like a business. You have to steward the resources. Like before we started recording this, we were talking about the building, that your church has and the renovations from Hurricane Ian, and that takes money and that takes time, that takes resources. What are some of your experiences, Jeff, when you talk to pastors when it comes to money, budgets? Give me some of the highlights as far as good or bad. Is it your experience that most of the pastors you talk to, have a healthy view of money, or is it more that they have an unhealthy view of money, especially in relation to how they manage money for the church?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's really, I would say in the churches that we serve, at least, it's kind of across the board, church planters in general. So, they're not thinking about the back end of money so much. They're thinking about the front end. So they're thinking about how do I get the money to plant the church, but they're not thinking as much about how do I steward that money well. How do I manage it, track it, report it, everything. And we had a situation where, in one of my churches where that I pastor, church plant, where we were growing and we were ready to build, and we went to the bank to ask for money, and they kind of laughed at us and said, you might have the money, but we can't tell from your books. And we had to go back and spend a year cleaning up our books and hiring CPA to do that and everything, before we could go back to the bank and present them with something that said, here, show them that we actually have what we say we have, right? And that's what I think a lot of church planters don't realize, at least early on. They're thinking, oh, this isn't really that important right now. It doesn't really matter about, keeping the books, that's, when I can hire a social media person, or I can hire a worship leader or a youth pastor, all these other things, everything else is more important. But at some point, if you don't do something about it, it's going to be a pain point, and it's going to be more painful to try to fix it than it is to do it right at the outset. So that's church planters. A lot of the more established churches we serve are pretty healthy, I would say, have healthy views of finances, and the advantage of an established church is that giving kind of snowballs, right? So you have, after years, if it's a healthy church, then you've got, legacy giving. You've got people that are, generations of families in the church. People, pass away, they leave, the church money in their will, but church plants don't, because they're so new, they don't have that luxury very often. They have to teach people about giving every step of the way, especially their church plant should be reaching unbelievers for Christ. And so they don't know anything about giving. Then, well, why should I give? Doesn't the Pope support the church? Something like that. They have no idea that, the people that all the money comes from the people. So you really have to educate and disciple people in a church plant about biblical generosity and why it's important to give, not just because, the church needs your money, but because it's a blessing to you to be able to give, and you will be blessed as a result.
Yeah, that's awesome. I remember sitting with a finance team one time, trying to cast some vision for a financial strategy for this multi-site church that I was the XP of. And I was asking them to consider that we not only needed a reactive approach to our finances, but we needed a proactive approach. And I think for them, it was the first time they had thought about, like most bookkeeping is somewhat reactionary, right? Like it's money in, money out, right? It's how much money did we get this week? How much money have we gotten this month? We're looking at kind of the year-to-date numbers. We set those budgets and we go, okay, we know our expenses are so much. But that's in many ways that's somewhat reactive. But what if it was proactive? And this church specifically, at the beginning of the year, they asked people to pledge, which I thought I'd never seen that before. I thought it was brilliant, inviting the congregation to consider a pledge for the year, whether they gave it every week, every month, once a year, whatever that amount was. And it was off of those pledges that they were able to build their budget. And so that was the beginning of like kind of a proactive approach. And then thinking of ways, like even in the discipleship flow, how they incorporate talking about money and things like that.
Yeah.
So
let me add something here, Jesse.
Yeah.
So, something that I advise church plants to do that is really hard. So like with our kids, we've raised our kids to, as they started getting allowance and then jobs. And now, we have 2 adult children and we've trained them to live off of 80% of what they make. So you save 10% and you give 10%. And because they've grown up with that mentality, they just know that 80% is all I have. But as churches, we really struggle with that. And especially as a new church, a church plant, you're thinking, I need every penny. I need every single penny. But if you can begin saving right from the outset and giving to bless others, but saving at the outset, then you will begin to build, that building fund, over the course of time before you even need it and have to go, begin to do a building campaign, giving campaign or whatever. You already have some seed money for that because you've been planning since the beginning. But if you don't do that right at the outset, we all know that like you can't go from 100% down to 80% at some future time. There's no way, in our church, we're just trying to increase our mission budget incrementally every year. And it's, we got a $2.4 million budget and it's hard. It's really hard just to find an extra 1%, to give. And so I really encourage churches to have that same mentality. I don't know if that's a Dave Ramsey thing, but like have that Dave Ramsey mentality that we're gonna live off of 80% from the outset.
Yeah, it's super helpful. That same church that had that was growing in their reactive versus proactive approach that I served at, I remember one of the campus pastors coming in with his vision for, 50% of our budget needs to go to missions. And as amazing as that was, it was like, well, that's going to take time to get to a place where we're living off of 50% and giving away 50%. The reality and the structure of that, especially when, it's, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's been my experience or what I've heard and what I've seen is that a lot of the church budget really goes to personnel and to buildings.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you really get down to it and you really tear it apart and look at it, such a minimal part actually goes to real ministry. Not that the building isn't important, not that personnel isn't important, but when you really take apart, the structure of most church budgets, is that what you find, that a lot of it goes to personnel and buildings? The two P's, right? People and property.
Yeah. I mean, those are definitely the two biggest expenses, and the ratio or percentage tends to be higher in the younger the church and the smaller the church. So if you're a small church, you have $100,000 budget, 60% of that might be going to personnel, to pay your solo pastor, whereas if you have a $1 million budget, it might be somewhere, like 400,000, which is 40%. A healthy range is, for personnel, is you definitely want it to be under 50%. But, again, if you're a smaller church solo pastor, it might be closer to 60. But, I think the healthy range is between 40 and 45% is where you really want to be for staffing costs, and property should be in that 20 to 30% less, less than 30%, same thing, same Dave Ramsey principle, I think, it's like, shouldn't be more than 30%. But so if you have 40 and 20, you're at about 60%. You're giving away 10%, you're saving 10%, that saves 20% for actual ministry.
Yeah. So this brings up an interesting kind of a dynamic, and I would say even potentially a dilemma, right? So back to that comment or that idea that sometimes I've heard from other pastors, the church is not a business, right? Because in the business world, so I just finished reading a series of books from Donald Miller, and one of the things that Donald Miller would say is that, like, your operation costs, you got to fight to keep those down, right? Because he uses this analogy of an airplane, and he says, like, if the operation costs are like the hull of the plane, right? And if it's too heavy, and you don't have enough wingspan or thrust, the plane's going to crash, right? And so I do find that churches are in somewhat of a predicament where their operational costs are very high, and so that means that the organization is heavy, and they're at risk. They really are kind of at risk because again, they're not really like a business. There's not like a product or a service that they're selling that they can easily measure to say, like, well, how do we get more of that to have better ROI? Donald Miller would say it's like, to expand the wings, and add more fuel so that you can, carry the hull that's heavy with operational costs.
Yeah.
So you're really just kind of counting on the generosity of people, and hopefully your, strategy to, disciple people well into giving. And there's this looming, every time you turn on the news, or you look at the financial section of the paper or social media, there's this looming idea of the recession. And I'm a little bit confused, like whether we are in the recession or whether the recession is coming.
It's always coming.
It's yeah, but it's certainly going to affect the church as an organization, right? So let's talk a little bit about that. What can a church do now in light of a impending recession, in light of the fact that a lot of churches have a very heavy operational costs? What are some practical things we could be thinking about and doing right now?
Yeah, I would, again, a lot of these things depend on the size of your church. One thing I would do is I would do an annual audit of like all your expenses. And so, especially this happens in larger churches where you got multiple departments, where you find out, well, we've got 3 Adobe subscriptions, What do we have 3 Adobe subscriptions for, And so, just do an internal audit just of your expenses. Say, like, is there anything we can cut, anything we're using? A lot of times things happen too, where you sign up for something, staff member signs up for something and it's an automatically recurring. subscription. This just happened to me. I signed up for something last year and they automatically renewed me last month. And I'm like, I don't want this anymore. I'm not using it anymore. But because it's not coming out of my personal bank
Right.
account, I don't notice.
Yeah.
Right. And so a lot of staff members, they don't notice that. And, if you don't have a good bookkeeper who's bringing that to your attention saying, hey, are you still using this? Why do we have 3 of these or 5 of these, or that sort of thing. So that's one thing for sure, is do that kind of that internal audit, just see, is there any place that we can save money? I would say, secondly, just be wise. I don't like the term frugal. I like to just say, be a good steward. It's God's money. Don't buy anything you don't need right now. But don't hold back. If you have the money, don't hold back so that you're missing ministry opportunities. So that's what I want to say, because sometimes a lot of churches, they just get in this really miserly mindset where like, we gotta save everything for a rainy day because might be this looming recession. We don't know what's going to happen. And so what they do is they build up this nest egg for a rainy day, and they never actually use it for ministry. And there are small churches that are sitting on, hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars even, that could be used for ministry, but they're just holding on to it because we're like, well, we might need that someday, if there's a nuclear holocaust or something, maybe. So don't be overly frugal, just be wise.
Yeah. Jeff, here's a question for you. Should churches invest money in the stock market, in real estate? Should they think about their money in a way that maybe you and I would individually, and go, hey, if I got a pay raise this year of say $10,000, and I'm comfortable, right? My mortgage is paid, my bills are paid, et cetera, and I've got this extra $10,000. What should I do with that money? If I'm leading a church, if I'm an executive pastor, or senior pastor, or if I'm on a finance team, is it good? Is it kosher for us to invest money in these ways as a church?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wouldn't invest in the stock market because there's a lot of risk assumed with that, and the old adage, of course, is don't invest anything you're not willing to lose. And that gets really sticky when you're a church, and it's other people's money, it's the Lord's money. And if you lose that, who wants to go to the congregation and say that? But there are a lot of lower interest, but more secure ways. And there's some great interest rates right now. Like even like you can get 5% just in a high yield savings account for a church right now, through several organizations. And so, what I see actually is a lot of churches not just taking advantage of those simple savings. Like you could move, like I see churches that have, $1 million sitting in a bank savings account that is earning 0.01% interest, not 1%, 0.01% interest, when they could be
getting $1 a year.
Yeah, exactly. Where you could be earning, 5% right now in a lot of places. And, there's always the CD option. That's the, one of the ongoing perennial, popular ways for churches to invest money is you got to put it in for 1 to 3 years. But, if you got the money, you don't need it right away. It's a good way to do that. And again, those rates I think are somewhere in that 4 to 6% right now as well. And so there's actually some really good rates that you could just move, and FDIC insured and all of that stuff. So that's what I recommend, is most churches can do better than they are without putting the church at risk.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask you a really, a question that's going to make me look really stupid here, but when you say don't invest in the stock market, does that even include like mutual funds?
Yeah, I mean, that's lower risk than the stock market, right? Because you're diversified. Okay. But I mean, I think there are some probably very low risk mutual funds that I'm not a financial advisor, so I don't feel like, sure. I don't want to go on record as saying giving advice, but there definitely, you've got the gamut when it comes to mutual funds. You've got, low risk to high risk, and
Yeah.
so, you just want to mitigate risk when you're dealing with the church's money, but you also want to, take advantage of what you can to, it's the parable of the talents, just take God's money and get more for it, and turn that into ministry. And while we're on this topic, though, I do want to share something that I think a lot of churches either aren't aware of or are really skeptical of right now. And it's money that is just sitting out there that could be used for ministry. And that is the ERC, which is the Employee Retention Credit, that is a product of the COVID-19 legislation, the CARES Act, where a lot of churches took advantage of the PPP loan, payroll protection loan. And, you had to, it was a 0% if you used it and you didn't have to pay it back. So this is that same act, but it's called the Employee Retention Credit. And this is not a loan. This is like a tax return. So just think about if your parent personal taxes, if you're a parent and you have kids, and every year you get like a child tax credit for having kids. The government says, hey, you had kids, good job, here's some money to help with that. So now in the same way, the government is saying, hey, you kept your employees during COVID, good job, here's some money back to help with that. And so it's a tax refund or credit. So if you had to shut down for any reason, like stop meeting in person, if you had to severely reduce your meeting capacity, if your giving went down, I think it's 10% or more during that time, and it's during a specific time, then you will likely qualify to get money. And our organization, Church Plant Solutions, has already helped churches get hundreds of thousands of dollars from the IRS, from the government, that can be used for ministry, and so again, it's not a loan from the government. This is if you take a tax refund personally, then you should have no ethical, theological qualms with getting this money from the government that can be used for ministry, because it's the exact same concept. It's a tax return, tax refund. It's on your payroll taxes. So I will add that it's on your payroll taxes, and pastors don't pay FICA. They don't pay Social Security, and churches don't pay FICA, don't pay Social Security, Medicare for pastors. They're considered self-employed by that. So in order to qualify, you have to have some non-pastoral staff that the church is paying FICA taxes for, or did pay FICA taxes for in 2020 and 2021. So if you have that, you've got an administrative assistant, anybody on staff that isn't pastoral level that you paid FICA tax for, then you should really look into this employee retention credit, and it could be money sitting there for ministry that you could use that could really help you out.
So Jeff, is that something that you could help churches with? And if so, how can those who are listening right now or watching get a hold of you to get more information about that from you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, we are helping churches with that. We have limited capacity. So we help as many churches as we can. And then we have a strategic partner that we use as well, that can help. And they're like the largest in the country at doing this. And so, but they charge more than we do, but they're a strategic partner. So if we take on what we can, and if we can't, then we refer on to them. So you can reach out to me at, just at jeff@churchplantsolutions.com or hello@churchplantsolutions.com. Just reach out and we can begin the process.
Yeah. And going back to what you were saying, how you got into the conversation of the ERC, the employee retention credit. As a matter of fact, we just found out about that, and I'm going through the process right now for Gateway Baptist Church here in Miami, helping them get that in place. I was just on the phone with Wells Fargo today trying to get the PPP loan paperwork, because that was done before I took on the books here. But another, and I'll just for lack of a better term, toot my own horn here. some money that's out there that's available for churches. I help churches get something called the Google Ad Grant, which is
You
10,000.
do. Good
Yeah,
segue.
it's yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I've done this a couple times. It's $10,000 a month in free Google ads. So it's not the same as the ERC where you're actually going to get a check and they're going to put, cash in your bank account. But if you think of it as a way that there's ROI on it, meaning that if you get $10,000 in like a gift certificate to the Google Ads Store, where you're basically able to run Google ads every month to reach people in your community, that's more families that are going to come to your church that if you're, have a good, healthy discipleship process, they're eventually going to become givers and tithers. And so that free money that Google offers you can turn into real money to help continue to expand the mission, the vision of what God's called you to do in the church. And so if I can help you in any way at the Digital Missions Project, you can reach me at jesse@digitalmissionsproject.com. And we have a free course that we give away, walking you step by step how to apply for the Google Ad Grant. Even if you never work with us, you can totally get the grant yourself and figure out how to run those ads. We think that's a incredibly valuable resource for every church that has a 501c3 determination with the IRS. So
yeah, absolutely. So Jesse, I think it's amazing what you do. So just tell us a little bit more about how does that process work? Like if a church is like, wow, like $10,000 a month
yeah
for Google ads. So what do they do with that?
Yeah.
How do you help them?
Yeah, so every ad, so like think of like every time you Google something and you see those little sponsored ads at the top, every time you click on one of those sponsored ads, Google will charge that business or company organization like a certain dollar amount per click. And the amount differentiates by the search volume and the competition. But let's give it a nice round number of $5 per click, right? And so if there's 100 people a month that are clicking on that ad, and that company's paying $5, right? That's $500 a month that Google makes, and that most businesses have to pay to Google, to have that ad there. Mm-hmm. With that grant, with the $10,000 grant, it doesn't actually cost you anything because it's being paid for by the grants. And so then what we do is we try to help you run as many ads, as many campaigns as possible to spend the entire $10,000, which is it's a lot. It's a lot. And
yeah, so, that's a lot.
Yeah. Our current system is we're trying to launch one campaign per month for all of our churches. And one campaign would be equal to 5 to 10 ads. And the way we think of campaigns is like a goal. Like, what's the goal? What are you trying to accomplish? Mm-hmm. And so it could be as simple as like just creating some awareness that your church exists. It could be deeper. It could be like people are Googling that they need prayer, right? And so then we send them to a landing page where, your church is saying, hey, we'll pray for you. And here's a form, submit your prayer request, and that goes to your prayer team. And then there's communication and there's engagement that happens with that person who submitted their prayer request. There are literally hundreds of things people are searching online, that really communicate that they're looking for hope, they're looking for answers, and the church has the greatest answer, right? We have the gospel of Jesus, and Tim Keller, would say, we have to contextualize the gospel, right? We have to, and so what we're doing is really missionary work. We're meeting people where they're at, mm-hmm. contextualizing the gospel for them, and we're engaging them in relationship. And so Google Ad Grant's an opportunity to do that, every single day. So,
and that's how people are finding your church, right?
It's
either word of mouth or it's online.
And we're all about like encourage your people to invite, mobilize your people. But we know the reality is that like 20% of the people are doing 80% of the work, right? So, mm-hmm. If 20%, if you have a church of say 1,000 people and 200 of them are out there inviting, that's great. It's amazing. But now imagine you have ads on Google that are out there running 24/7 on different topics. So let's say you preach a sermon series on, relationship difficulties or, marriage, you could run a whole Google ad campaign on that.
Yeah.
You could leverage the content and the resources that you have to reach people that are Googling about relationship difficulties and marriage and those types of things. And then 24/7, 365 days a year, you've got Google reaching people for you on your behalf, connecting them back to the ministry and work that you're doing.
Yeah. And then and it validates the ministry, because then when somebody makes that personal invite, then the person they're talking to is like, oh yeah, I've seen that church, I've heard about that church, right? Or and so it adds validity to that in-person invite as well. So that's really cool. And while we're on this topic of saving money for churches, there's tons of things out there like this. Not I don't know anything as amazing as what you're doing with the Google ad grant, but there's all kinds of ways that nonprofits, i.e. churches, if you have your 501c3, can save money. Microsoft has a program, Google has a program. If you don't know about TechSoup, I mean, that's where you got to go to get your subscriptions. The biggest thing with us in doing bookkeeping is at TechSoup, you can get a QuickBooks Online Plus subscription, which is all you need at TechSoup for $75 a year. A year, which is less than what it
normally costs like $85 or $100 a month.
Right. Yes. So it's like you buy 1 month and you get 11 free. And people don't know that. So people don't realize is they think, well, I got to get some church specific, nonprofit specific software, and there's no perfect software out there, but everything we do is through QuickBooks because it's the industry leader. It has the most integrations of any software out there, and you can get this amazing deal through TechSoup. And so you can actually get a QuickBooks subscription and hire Church Plant Solutions for less than what you would just get like a normal subscription to some other, nonprofit specific software typically. And so, check out TechSoup, make sure like before you get anything like Adobe, like all that stuff, you can get discounts and even free software for a lot of things. Yeah.
And I would say, listen, you see Jeff's t-shirt, it says "We Know Church," period, right? Like, you're listening to two guys here who not only do we know church, but we love the church. And if there's any way that we can serve you, reach out to Jeff at churchplantsolutions.com or Jesse at digitalmissionsproject.com. We'd love to help in any way that we can, or we'll at least point you in the right direction to someone or someplace that can help you with the needs that you have, so that we can continue to see the gospel go out and to flourish. Jeff, any parting thoughts as we wrap up our time here? Any words of wisdom for pastors or church planners?
I just want to reiterate, what you just said, Jesse, and that, we're in this because we love the church, right? And we feel like, our unique gifts and experience and wisdom and knowledge, that we can help churches, help pastors, not just with our business sense, but, we have a lot of ministry experience under our belt. So when you partner with one of us, it's like having an executive pastor at your fingertips, in a lot of ways, because, we have, I don't know, 40 years of ministry between the two of us, I'm sure. I'm over 20, I'm sure you are as well. And so, there's lots of knowledge that we have, and we do it because we love the church and we want to help her any way that we can, because we want to reach more people and we want to see healthy pastors, healthy churches doing it.
Yeah, that's right. Amen. All right. Well, thanks for joining us on this podcast, whatever you want to call it. We're glad that you were with us. If there's anything that we can do to serve you or help you, don't hesitate to reach out. God bless.
Yeah.